Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well and are having a flare-free day. Thanks so much for coming to my channel. On today's video, I want to talk about something that's pretty important to not only myself, but I think society in general. And that is tackling period stigmas that are still in existence today in 2023. When I first started my YouTube channel and when I first started my Instagram page, I remember thinking to myself that I was a little nervous to show my face, talking about periods openly and talking about my own specific period journey, and that it was painful. I just felt a little nervous because I was like, oh, are friends and family gonna see this? Or what are they gonna think of me talking openly about periods? And I think it's like a thought that was subliminally ingrained into my psyche, I guess, of don't talk about periods because they're gross or dirty, or that people will think it's gross and dirty. When in reality, being open for a couple of years now on socials, I realized how important it is to be open about period and menstrual health, specifically not only to help others realize that like period pain is not normal, and we'll get into that, but the larger impact that period stigmas have on access to resources and care that people should be receiving in the medical system. And so I kind of want to dive into a couple of portions around period stigmas today and my thoughts around it more generally, and the importance of kind of debunking them and how we can kind of work towards eliminating stigmas in society. Fingers crossed that we can do that someday. But generally in 2023, my own opinion is that period stigmas still exist, and there is a culture of, wow, that's gross or dirty, do not talk about it. I think society is getting a little better, and I don't know if I think that because I'm following accounts that are open about period and menstrual health, and I feel like I'm just seeing it more because those accounts are what I'm following, or if it's generally getting better. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below if you believe it's getting better or worse, depending on what you see in day-to-day pop culture or in the news. Now, historically, menstruation and periods have somewhat been associated with feeling shameful, embarrassed, or even there's like a level of secrecy that goes into periods and menstruation. When I look back on my elementary school experience, I was very young when I started my first period, and I remember being really secretive about asking for a period product from my teacher or a friend that was also starting their period early. I didn't want people to see that I was asking for a pad or a tampon, and I was nervous if they could hear it crinkling in my hands when I walked to the bathroom. And I don't know what that was about, but I feel like it was that ingrained psyche of they're gonna think it's gross or dirty, or that I am gross and dirty for being on my period. And I owe that to media and being very negative and showing periods in a negative light. I think it's getting better somewhat in society. I think we're being more open about periods and menstruation, and that it's natural and beautiful and hygienic. But yeah, I remember even gym classes when I was in elementary school and high school, and my period cramps would be at a level where I couldn't participate, but you know, being fine in class, but then not participating in gym class, it made me feel weak. And it made me feel like I don't want to be open about what's going on right now, but I feel like people are seeing me as weak or unable to do things or incapable of participating. I associated that in my brain as my period is making me not do the things that I want to do. In some sense, that was the reality with endometriosis. Like it KOs me sometime and I can't do the things I want to do, but to have that perception of people thinking that as well made me feel self-conscious around my menstrual cycle. I definitely see the impacts that period stigmas has had on my openness, but growing older and feeling more comfortable talking about my journey, specifically as like a therapeutic method to talk about painful periods and getting through that journey myself, has been really great. And I found a community that is also open around periods and menstrual health. But more generally, I do believe that there are so many hindrances to not only the individual with a period, but also to society as a whole. And so the first level I see that period stigmas impact are that individual feeling embarrassed or shameful or having to be secretive around their period or menstrual cycle. The second level where I see period stigmas impacting the individual and society as a whole is that, again, that level of secrecy around don't talk about your period because it's gross and dirty ultimately leads to a lack of awareness and education around menstrual cycles and periods. And it leads to misinformation around what is normal and not normal around periods. So number one, it impacts the individual who menstruates because, again, I look back on my journey and the lack of awareness around period pain not being normal yet common really did hinder my journey on getting proper pain management and support and resources for the pain and experiences that I lived with, because it did impact the quality of life that I had or did not have at the time. And so what I worry about is that if period stigmas still exist today, that young individual that is going through that first painful flare-up or first painful period and doesn't know what's going on, I just hope that they don't have to wait 14 years the same way I did to get proper pain management and support. And number one, I'm so sorry if that was the case, because it shouldn't have been that way. We shouldn't have waited that long to get proper education and awareness for the pain that was going on with their menstrual cycles. And again, I look back on society and I think it's done such a disservice to us who menstruate, because those stigmas ultimately caused us to not get the amount of proper care and awareness that we deserved. The third level where I see period stigmas impacting both the individual and society as a whole is the potential that it has to limit access to proper menstruation products, such as period pads and tampons. When you look at certain communities or rural, remote areas, specifically in Canada, access to menstrual products is sometimes really difficult. And it does impact an individual's quality of life, it impacts their health, and it could impact their ability to do daily activities. So, if you don't have proper access to menstrual products that make you feel confident and secure when you're having your period, it can really impact your confidence and your ability to take part in work or school or the things you want to do or are required to do. So definitely an impact that period stigmas still have today in 2023. The final area where I see period stigmas impacting both individuals and society as a whole is the impact it can have on mental health. If you feel like society is looking at you as someone who menstruates as dirty or gross, it can really impact the way you view yourself, and it can impact the way you view your menstrual cycle and period. Negative societal attitudes around periods and menstrual cycles can have a significant impact on the mental well-being of those who menstruate. These types of feelings can lead to, potential isolation from groups, specifically during your period. I know sometimes when there was swim classes or other things going on, I was like, I don't want to go. Like, I just feel so embarrassed that I'm on my period. Like, what if they can tell when I'm in the pool or whatever it may be? Like, it leads to exclusion and isolation sometimes because you are fearful of that period showing in society when in reality it's hygienic and natural. So definitely a hindrance that still may continue in today's society. I know that there are efforts to combat period stigmas. I know that there are groups specifically in Canada that are working towards ending period stigmas. Endo Act, the Endometriosis Network of Canada, the Period Purse in Toronto. There's so many others. I'm sure, please feel free to pop them in the comment box below if you know of any, because I'd love to highlight them. But there are so many hindrances that period stigmas cause, and I just want to shed light on them today. I do believe that there are aspects that we can end period stigmas, and this is not an exhaustive list, but I do believe that proper education and awareness when people are young can really help stir the pot of support and that it's natural, and that when they grow older they can disseminate that information to that next generation that, oh, periods are natural and great, and don't be embarrassed or don't feel ashamed or secret about it. It's hygienic and it's fine. I think in that same vein that increasing awareness and education can help those that have painful periods as a symptom of something else can get support quicker than myself or potentially you did in your endometriosis or PCOS adenomyosis journey. That is my hope. And I hope that happens, because the way I view stigmas now is it's so incredibly disappointing to see that some individuals are still waiting years to get answers for period pain that they may experience. I think accurate and positive representation of menstrual cycles in media can really help bolster support for periods in society, and encouraging media outlets to kind of break away from negative stereotypes around periods can also be a way that we move forward. I think we can see that in today's society a little bit. You see some shows talking about endometriosis or periods more generally, but sometimes it's still done in like a bit of a comedic way, or a bit of like oh, I have to hide what's happening to me as like a young person, when it can just be like, oh, I've started my period, and kind of go through a storyline that's normal and natural. So that could be one way that media outlets can kind of support the cause on eliminating period stigmas in society. Access to menstrual products, regardless of where you live and who you are. So if you are low income or you live in a rural, remote area, you should be able to access proper hygienic period products, because it is like a human decent right to have. Schools, workplaces, and public facilities should have adequate access to these products. I think more generally too, I like being gender neutral when it comes to menstruation, but when you encourage men and boys in the discussion around periods to help debunk myths or help debunk, that stigma that periods are gross and dirty, it can really help elevate the discussion so that it's not just those who menstruate that are kind of fighting the battle of this is what it is. I'm sure there are so many other ways that we could end period stigmas outside of these ones I've discussed, but I'm curious if it's like we focus on one avenue, like media representation, or if it's a combination of everything. But I hope one day that periods will be an open discussion that we can have, and that people get the right care in the right place at the right time for their period pain or their menstrual health. But I do believe that we still have a long way to go. I hope, fingers crossed, that we can get to that point sooner rather than later. And by having these open discussions, and by you watching and just being supportive around periods, it means so much, and it does make a difference. So please feel free to continue the conversation around menstruation. Like, it starts with you, and it doesn't have to end with you either. Having those discussions openly with friends and family or those you love can really help bolster that period stigma ending. So I would love to hear your experience too on if you've kind of started those conversations and how they went, if you had them with friends and family. So with that, I will talk to you on the next one.